Good morning, everyone. Hello. Morning, and welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna, number 123, where we're looking at the Cameron Head of Inverailort collection. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. I'm based in our Highland Archive Centre in Inverness, but I also work with all three other centres that we have. So we have an archive centre in Fort William, in Portree and in Wick, and I work alongside my colleagues in all of those four centres. This series, as you'll know if you've been watching for a while, is designed to bring the collections that we look after into people's own houses to learn a bit more about what we hold and what we do, and the huge variety of information that we are privileged to look after and to share. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription to take part in the Learn with Lorna series, but if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful for that. So welcome to the first of November's Learn with Lorna, and as I said last week, it always feels to me like Learn with Lorna's natural home is in the autumn. It feels like it's a lovely sort of communal thing to do as the nights draw in and the days get shorter. Hi Steve, nice to see you're watching live after watching through the recordings for ages. Nice to have you with us live. Everyone will say hello to you. We're a nice bunch. So welcome to the first of November's Learn with Lorna. This week we're looking at one of the family and estate collections that we hold in our Lochaber Archive Centre. If you've been watching for the last few weeks, you'll be well aware I've had a cold. I still have the cough. I'm doing my best. Okay, so you'll know that sometimes I look at a theme that goes across collections held in all the offices, like school records or diaries, and sometimes I focus on one collection held in one office. This week I'm looking at a collection from our Lochaber Archive at Cameron Head of Inverailort. So many thanks to Rory in our Lochaber Archive Centre, who's pulled together some notes for me about this collection. As you'll know, I write all of them, and I research all the Hark ones myself. But for ones that are more specific to other offices, I rely on my colleagues there to help. So I'm grateful for Rory's help for this one. So the Cameron Head collection spans the 19th and the 20th centuries, 1800s and the 1900s, and it's a very frequently used collection in our Lochaber Archive Centre, full of documents over a really wide range of subjects. It relates to the lives and the work of the Camerons of Inverailort. So they are Camerons and then Cameron Heads, as we'll come back to in a second. The estate is in Moidart in the west coast of Scotland in the Lochaber area. The collection comprises a huge amount of things. It's over 110 boxes, so it's a big collection. Correspondence, accounts, diaries, notebooks, photographs, all sorts of different things. And I thought the best way to look at this particular collection would be to go through it by generation, so the different generations who are represented in it and the different people who have held control of the estate. And the first member of the Cameron family that we think lived at Inverailort House was Major General Sir Alexander Cameron. And he seems to have bought the estate from the MacDonalds of Clanranald in about 1828. The reason I'm kind of hedging my bets on that is there's some debate about when the estate came into the family and so on. But I think that the general consensus seems to be around 1828. Bought by Sir Alexander Cameron. Now, the earliest documents in this collection are connected to Major General Sir Alexander Cameron. He was born in around 1781 in the Lochaber area, and he had a very distinguished military career. He trained under Sir John Moore, who, if anyone has knowledge of the period and military history, may recognise that name, quite a high-profile person within the military in that generation, but also involved in the training of a lot of other high-profile military officers. Sir Alexander Cameron served in the 74th Highland Regiment of Foot, and he served under the Duke of Wellington, and he fought in the Napoleonic Wars. He fought, as so many of that time did, in numerous battles, and he received a large number of medals, as well as severe injuries. So for the battles he fought at, it seems like for a very high proportion he got both a medal and an injury. He fought at the Battle of Vittoria, the Battle of Alexandria, and he fought and was most severely wounded at the Battle of Waterloo on the 18th of June 1815. He took, and it's funny, you know, sometimes you read things and, you know, I read all sorts of documents, as you'll know, but sometimes you read things and you're just like, oh, they just connect right to you. He took a bullet to the throat. A bullet to the throat at the Battle of Waterloo, and it was said that when he died, some 35 years later, that bullet was still lodged in his body. That injury was so severe, as you might expect, that he never served in the military again. I've said previously that we don't really hold newspapers. Newspapers tend to be held in libraries because they're published material, so we don't usually hold them, and that is largely true. But there are occasions where there will be a newspaper that comes into the collections. And in this collection there's a copy of the Times newspaper from 1815 describing the Battle of Waterloo. And it stayed with that collection because the Battle of Waterloo, obviously hugely significant in European history, but also within that one man's personal history and within the history of that family in that collection. So we still hold that copy. I mentioned that Sir Alexander Cameron was highly decorated with medals for his military service. He got the Army Gold Medal with 2 clasps for the Peninsular War, the Military General Service Medal and 5 clasps. He got the Sultan's Medal for Egypt, the Waterloo Medal, and he was made Knight of the Russian Order of St. Anne. In 1832 he was made Major General, and in 1838 made Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, KBE. KCB? Knight Commander, KCB. Sorry, I got my letters all wrong there. So you can see him not only receiving those military recognitions, but also more and more acknowledgement for his service to the country. And then in 1846 he was made Colonel-in-Chief of the 74th Regiment. And it's interesting that those last 3, the Major General, the KCB and the Colonel-in-Chief, are all coming years after his military service ended. And it's very clear in the collection that his military service was his driving passion. And the Cameron Head collection includes an extract from the Waterloo roll call detailing his service, but also this letter which shows the lasting toll that service took on him. This is a letter written by Sir Alexander Cameron to Lord Fitzroy Somerset, who was military secretary to the Duke of Wellington in 1839. And it's written from Inverailort on the 7th of January. My dear Lord, during the 3 months I was in Leamington, my health was such that I could not travel to London, much as I wished to have done myself the pleasure of waiting on his lordship the Commander-in-Chief, to offer my sincere and best thanks for what he has done for me of late. About the time I left Leamington you were out of town, and that being the case I thought it best to come north direct. I am sorry to say that since my return to the Highlands my health has been very indifferent indeed, and at times I suffer much pain. However, I trust that as soon as the weather gets milder, my health may improve. I must confess that I feel very unhappy at not being able to serve my sovereign and country like others of my rank, but this is now out of the question. Therefore, it is happy for me that I am at this moment addressing one who knows better than any other should do alive that while I had health, I did my best to serve my country. Let me also refer to your lordship if ever I asked anything for myself, not even a step of promotion during that time. Thank God I had no occasion to do so, it being my great and good fortune to be a follower of my great chief the Duke in almost all his campaigns in Europe from 1807 to 1815, during which time I had my share of promotion without asking for it, which your letters will show when I am no more. My intention, if health permits, is to go to London in the latter end of spring, in hope that His Lordship the Commander-in-Chief may be pleased to take my state into his favourable consideration, and name me for a regiment, or to the largest allowance allowed to a general officer for services until such time as a regiment can be given me. So he's obviously writing there to Fitzroy Somerset. You can feel how much it grates on him that he's not in a fit enough physical state to serve anymore. He was close friends with the Duke of Wellington, and he's writing there to say, I'm not able to do more, but I've never asked for anything previously, but now I need your help. The letter goes on. The fact is that my family now are grown up and must be more expensive to me, and my present means are inadequate to support my rank or to make any provision for them, which is harassing to the feelings of a parent. I may say with great truth that I served in the campaign in Holland in 1799 under His late Royal Highness the Duke of York, in 1800 in Ferrol under Sir James Pulteney, in 1801 in Egypt under the late Sir Ralph Abercrombie, when I received 2 wounds, being then a lieutenant in the Rifle Corps, but also got leave with the 92nd Highlanders. I also served under the late Sir John Moore in Spain, and in 1841 in Flanders under Lord Lindach. As for the rest of my humble service, no one knows better than your lordship. Do not, my dear lord, think that it is presuming too much on your long-continued friendship and partiality towards me that causes me to make this private communication. Believe me, it is not so. I would rather be poor all my days than forfeit your friendship and your good opinion. With every good wish for your health and happiness, I remain ever faithfully yours. So that's him writing to say, please, is there anything I can do? Is there a rank I can be given? Is there any promotion I can be given? I've never asked for it before, but is there anything that can help me support my family at the moment? I mentioned that he stopped serving in 1815 after the Battle of Waterloo. He married in 1818 a lady called Christian, usually, sometimes Christina, the names are interchangeable, Macdonnell, with whom he had at least 5 children, 3 of whom died young, and we know certainly that Duncan Cameron and Arthur Wellington Cameron survived into adulthood. When Alexander died in 1850, it was his oldest son, Duncan Cameron, who'd been born in 1819, who succeeded him into the ownership of Inverailort Estate and Inverailort House. And as I mentioned, a reference at the time he died that bullet he'd got in the throat was still present in his body. So we come from Alexander Cameron's time at the head of Inverailort to Duncan Cameron, his son. And the documents in the collection from this time period relate mostly to estate management under Duncan Cameron. Things like stock statistics, so sheep, wool, the amount of sheep being dipped and clipped and how much produce there is coming out of the estate. Accounts as well, so invoices and wages and so on. Now, as well as following his father in owning and managing Inverailort, Duncan also followed him into a military career, serving in the 42nd Highlanders, the Black Watch, as a lieutenant, although his service in the military was much shorter than his father's. And it's something I have spoken about numerous times, that, and it still continues to this day, that you get a family that has a military connection and they retain that through generations and generations. And I'm sure there will be somebody watching who has got a family connection like that, where generations do the same service. Duncan Cameron married twice. He first married Louisa Campbell in 1849, and then Alexa or Alexandrina, very hard to say, Alexandrina Marion MacLeod Gillespie. So he married twice. His first marriage resulted in 1 daughter who died in infancy, but his second marriage had surviving children, including Christian Helen Jane and Frances Alexandra. Duncan, after his term at the head of Inverailort Estate, I said he took it over when his father died in 1850, Duncan went on to die unexpectedly in 1874, and the estate ownership passed to his oldest daughter, Christian. However, at the time the estate passed to Christian, she was only 15 years old when her father died, and therefore she was unable to take over the practical estate management. An Inverailort trust had been created as a kind of conservatorship in case that happened, and Christian's uncle and Duncan's brother, Arthur Wellington Cameron, stepped in to oversee the estate's management on behalf of the trustees and on behalf of his niece until she was of age. I love that his Arthur Wellington Cameron. There are papers relating to Arthur in this collection as well, so although he was never officially the owner of the estate, he, as I say, looked after it on behalf of his niece after his brother's death. And there are documents relating to Arthur in the collection, so there are letters, things like his Freemason certificates, and he also had served in the military. He was a colonel of the 92nd Gordon Highlanders, serving in Crimea and in India. He oversaw Inverailort from the time his brother died in 1874 until Christian was able to take it over in 1885. And then, having done this duty to his brother, to his niece, and to the estate, he died in 1888. I wanted to share with you an article from the Northern Chronicle and General Advertiser. I know I have raved a lot. There are a few websites I've raved a lot about over the years. One is the Dictionary of Scots Language, Scotland's Places is another, the British Newspaper Archive is another, and that's where I found this article. As I say, from the Northern Chronicle, written on the 1st of August 1888, which gives a very interesting summary of Arthur's life and death. The late Colonel Cameron. We regret to announce the death of Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Wellington Cameron, late of the 92nd Gordon Highlanders, which took place at Denane House, Inverness, on Friday the 27th ult. Colonel Cameron was the youngest son of the late Major General Sir Alexander Cameron, KCB, KCH of Inverailort, an officer who served with very marked distinction in the Rifle Brigade through the Peninsular and Waterloo campaigns, receiving on the field of the latter a bullet in his neck which disabled him from future active service. Sir Alexander's mother was a daughter of MacDonald of Auchendracht, Auchendrachten, sorry, I'm absolutely butchering that pronunciation, Glencoe. Following in the footsteps of his father, so they're talking now about Arthur Wellington following in the footsteps of his father, Colonel Cameron at an early age entered the Royal Military College Sandhurst, where he rose to be a captain of the college and was gazetted to the 92nd Gordon Highlanders in 1844. With this regiment he served in the Crimea and all through the Indian Mutiny, rendering able service to the British arms on more than one occasion. In 1873 he succeeded to the command of the regiment, which he retained until 1874, when the sudden death of his brother Duncan Cameron of Inverailort caused him first to obtain leave of absence, and finally, in 1876, to send in his resignation, in order that he might devote his life to the care of his brother's widow and 2 children. How nobly he performed his part in this task he set for himself, is best known to those who now mourn his loss. Colonel Cameron lost his leg in 1879 from the results of an accident while driving, and this in its turn ultimately produced a weakness in the heart. In April 1887, this weakness became more marked and culminated in a seizure of a very dangerous nature. From this, however, he had recovered, and although to a great extent an invalid, he had been in fair health and very good spirits lately. On Friday morning at about 3:30, his butler heard a noise, and entering his master's room, found that he had fallen out of bed and was quite insensible. Medical aid was at once summoned, but in vain, and Colonel Cameron, after remaining unconscious for about an hour, expired, the doctor giving it as his opinion that the immediate cause of death was apoplexy, accelerated by imperfect action of the heart. With Colonel Cameron, the last male representative of the Camerons of Inverailort, the last male representative disappears, as also through his mother do the MacDonnells of Barrisdale, a once powerful branch of the MacDonnells of Glengarry. Colonel Cameron was born in 1827 and was consequently in his 61st year at the time of his death. The funeral took place yesterday, with the remains being interred in the Cameron burial ground at Kilmallie. It's quite a touching tribute, I think, because there's the reference there to his military career and his work, but it's that reference to the task he set himself of looking after his brother's family, and that his losses can be best expressed by those mourning him now. So we've come from Alexander to Duncan to Duncan's brother, Arthur Wellington. On Arthur's death in 1885, he died in 1888, just before he had died, 3 years before, Christian Cameron had taken over the management of the estate at the age of 26. Now, I've spoken about Christian in a previous episode when I did Women in the Lochaber Archive Centre collections, but I thought for the sake of continuity I would give a brief summary of her here as well. She very quickly, on taking over the estate, became adept at the role of managing and running the estate. And she started to turn her hand not only to estate management, but also to the hobbies that she would become renowned for, notably the breeding of West Highland Terriers and elk hounds. She went on to marry ex-army officer and successful shipping company owner James Head, and it's from here on in that the family became known as the Cameron Heads. And you can see that aim to keep the Cameron name, because that's the name that the estate is associated with in that line, and so she's double-barrelling her name to keep that connection. And the collection comprises a wealth of material from the period that Christian is in charge. Let me read a list of some of the sorts of correspondence that are in here. And when I say that, each subject I'm talking about may have one or dozens of bundles of letters associated with it. So there are papers relating to fishing on the River Aylort and Lochielt, the London properties that the family owned, insurance and staffing at Inverailort House, including timesheets of the staff for this period, documents relating to sheep stealing and night poaching on the estate, deer management, the Lochaber Vermin Club, papers relating to house improvements, so things like there are plans, there are quotes about having plumbing repaired or electrics installed, heating repairs. There are documents relating to the Mallig extension of the West Highland Railway, roads, housing. There's a very typical estate collection on the breadth of subjects that it touches on, because every estate collection that we have will have things from the very localised. So, for instance, there are inventories of rooms in Inverailort House, so a summary of an inventory of the contents of the wine cellar or the pantry or the servants' hall, wages books and staff diaries of what the staff were doing each day. So all estate collections will have that very localised to the very broad things that are affecting the entire area. So notes and correspondence about the hydroelectric schemes that are being set up and established in the area. Documents relating to the proposed West of Scotland Airway that was proposed to be set up. So, as I say, all the estate collections have that broad view because they're involved in not only their own management of their own estates, but also things like railways coming in will have an impact on the people who own the land. So you can find a really broad range of information there. For this time period, there are also stock records, so things like the dairy yield, cattle breeding programmes, records of sheep, death stats, legal documents to do with the marches, the boundaries of the estate, accounts, maps, plans. So there's a huge amount of archive material that is generated in running an estate. And then, in addition to that, there are the papers relating to the family who own the estate. So, for instance, there are a large number of letters between Christian and her husband James, documents relating to her hobbies. So you may recall I mentioned that in the previous episode that she was involved to some extent in the suffragette movement. But you may also remember I mentioned that Christian was breeding dogs. She was a very successful dog breeder. And this collection includes photos, pedigree charts, registers, insurance policies, press cuttings, correspondence relating to her dog breeding activities. But I wanted to share with you one letter written to a Mrs. Innes in 1922, and I'm smiling because I feel like it gives a bit of an insight into her character. I just get a feeling about her from this letter. Dear Mrs. Innes, in response to your letter, what I want you to do is plainly set out forth in my letter to you in the 14th of January, i.e., you should make proper restitution to me for my bitch which you lost when you sent me when sent to your charge by letting it wander about in your garden. So I have clearly stated what I expect from you. I want restitution. I want payback for the fact that you lost my dog. I cannot agree that the almost white-eyed pup you sent to me is worth £50 or in any way makes up to me for the loss of Tartar. Tartar was a house-trained pet and a very good specimen of the breed, as your written description when you received her testifies. I therefore trust that you will see fit to let me have a good dog puppy in addition to the light-eyed bitch to end this matter. I sent 4 bitches to you on breeding terms. 2 died, 1 was returned to me, and 1 I went and fetched. I sent 3 to you to be mated. 1 was lost outright, and 2 were returned unmated. You still owe me a service, but I prefer not to go to the great expense of a 3rd time of uselessly sending a bitch to Colwyn Bay. Perhaps you can make some proposal in this regard. My last experience about Jessie's puppies has been most unfortunate, underlined. I did not even know they were ill until they had been dead for some time. Yours faithfully. And I just get a feeling from that letter alone that you probably wouldn't cross her. So there are a range of other letters to do with that subject, to do with the breeding of dogs, but also things, as I mentioned, between the family. For instance, when her husband James was travelling in South America, there are letters backwards and forwards. Christian and James had 2 children, twins called Francis and Christian. And Francis with an I, so Francis is boy, and Christian the girl, born in 1896. And the daughter Christian seems to have suffered with poor mental health throughout her life, but particularly after 1922 when her father died very suddenly. From her 20s onwards, she seems to have lived in various institutions, although it's not clear whether she was actually certified to do so. We hold a large amount of correspondence between Christian the daughter and Christian the mother, and from the mother about the daughter over this period, written to doctors, to specialists, to institutions including the Crichton in Dumfries and St George's Retreat in Burgess Hill. And there's a particularly sad letter written in 1929 where Christian the mother is writing to a professor to express her sorrow and distress and misery at the fact that Christian seems to have turned a bit violent. The mother claims that she has delusions. She's been told by a spiritualist and a medium not to trust her mother, and it seems to have had a huge impact on her. And Christian the mother just writes really touchingly about how desperately sad she is about the state of her daughter's health. And Christian the mother, I feel for, because she suffered quite a lot of sorrows in her life, and that kind of very forthright character you feel coming across in that letter about the dogs. You just wonder if it's a result of so many tragedies. So she lost her dad when she was only 15. She then lost the uncle in her 20s who had been, the next best thing she'd had to a father. Her husband then died young. Her daughter seems like she was severely mentally unwell. And then, as you may recall, I've mentioned a couple of times in previous episodes that the Inverailort estate was requisitioned during World War II. And Christian returned from London, where she was supporting a family member in an operation. She returned home to find the troops taken over Inverailort House, been requisitioned by the War Office as part of a special operational training. And it was then taken on and used in training the commandos. David Niven, the actor, amongst others, trained at Inverailort. The army left in 1942, and then the navy moved in, at which point the house was renamed HMS Inverailort for the period that the navy were in charge. So I just feel for Christian that she's had this sort of one issue after another, and she died in 1945, Christian, the mother, died in 1945 with the rumoured cause being a broken heart because of the amount of damage that had been done to her property and her belongings during that military requisition. So there's no doubt at all that Inverailort played a part in the Second World War, in training of that the special military forces, but also training of the commandos and then the navy. But it certainly seems to have taken a toll on Christian and on the family. On Christian's death, the estate was taken over by her son, younger Christian's brother, Francis. Francis studied at Balliol College, Oxford. Balliol College, which for anyone who is a reader of Lord Peter Wimsey, it's Dorothy L. Sayers, where he went. So Francis studied at Balliol at Oxford and was a practising barrister. He also served in the Royal Company of Archers, who are the Queen's bodyguard in Scotland. So you'll be familiar with them perhaps if you saw when the Queen's body lay in state in Scotland. The Royal Company of Archers were involved in that guard of the body. And so Francis served with them, and also in later life went on to serve in the Home Guard. And Francis's correspondence includes a really wide variety of people. So he has letters in the collection from Compton Mackenzie, author of Whisky Galore and Monarch of the Glen, from the famous Scottish folklorist and naturalist Seaton Gordon, who was best man at his wedding, and also from physical culturalist Fred Hornibrook. And when I was thinking which one to share with you, this is a paper from Fred Hornibrook giving some health tips to Francis. So have a see what you think about this. Daily programme for good health. On rising, gargle throat. Take half a glass of cold water followed by a hot drink. So you do that for 10 seconds followed by a minute. Then go to the toilet. Use a 10-inch footstool and try to empty bowels at least twice daily. When shaving, stand on the outside of your feet to prevent fallen arches. Do exercises for 5 to 7 minutes. If pressed for time, do exercises when in bath. After bath, holding sides of bath, squat on heels 3 times, straightening knees fully after each time. 7 minutes worth of exercises. Breakfast, fruit, preferably raw. Tea or coffee, toast with marmalade or honey. 6 seconds. Lunch, light lunch, meat, fish or fowl with plenty of salad, tomato, celery, beetroot, followed by fresh or stewed fruit, no pudding. 6:30 to 7 p.m. unless teetotal, first drink of alcohol, sherry, whiskey and soda, not cocktails. Dinner, full dinner, no puddings. Maximum time spent on health in 24 hours, 8 minutes 16 seconds. Then there's a subsection, don't sag. Stand with third button of waistcoat most prominent. Sit with buttocks well back. Walk from hips, not from knees. When walking in good air, take a few deep breaths from time to time. Do not wear tight collars. So there you go. So I expect next week to see everyone being utterly healthy and fit on that advice. Does sound a little bit bonkers, doesn't it? I know, no puddings. Says that at lunch and dinner. So you can see that Francis had a really interesting array of people corresponding to him. And in addition to that, there are papers, of course, relating to the estate management, but also relating to companies that he was director of or shareholder in. Francis married the brilliantly named Lucretia Pauline Rebecca Anne Farrell in 1942, who went by the name of Pauline or Poochie. So there are letters in there addressed to Poochie, not even just from him, but from other people. And Pauline had been born in Glasgow of Irish parentage, and at the age of 2, during the Irish War of Independence, she and her sisters had been rescued by a gardener when their house had been burnt down. Frances and Pauline were both really heavily involved in voluntary and charitable affairs, both local and national causes, and they both took on official roles, again locally and nationally. Pauline served as the Deputy Lieutenant of the county and also as a Justice of the Peace for Inverness. Frances was a councillor for Chelsea Borough Council, because the family had houses in London as well, and he was also a member of the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St John of Jerusalem, setting up medical comforts depots. He also served in the Territorial Army and, as I mentioned, went on to serve in the Home Guard. And there's a huge number of other roles that both of them served. And just as a short list, they were involved heavily in the 1745 Association, the Clan Cameron Association, the National Association for the Prevention of Tuberculosis, the SSPCA, Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Dundee, Inverness and North Western Welfare Association for the Deaf, the Scottish Community Drama Association, the Lochaber Handicapped Association, and they set up the Glenfinnan Highland Gathering in 1946. And there are documents relating to many of these organisations, causes, institutions in the collection, as well as their own private diaries and photographs and estate records. There are also some really lovely letters from children who camped at Inverailort, so the estate seems to have been used, as it was used in the Second World War, as a camp base for training, seems to have gone on and been used by children as a camp venue in later years. And so there's some lovely letters addressed to dear Aunt Poochie. Thank you for looking after me, dear Aunt Poochie. So after a very busy and active and diverse life, Francis died in 1957, leaving Inverailort under the control of his wife, Pauline. And Pauline continued her extensive voluntary and charitable works there, and eventually was awarded the OBE in 1971. And this is a letter from the collection that refers to that, written by the Gaelic Society of London. Dear Mrs. Cameron Head, please accept my congratulations on behalf of the Gaelic Society of London following your recent award. We have you on record as a life member of this society, and even if it were not so, you deserve our congratulations. Mrs. M. Stewart, past Chief of the Society, has also been honoured with the OBE in the latest Queen's Honours birthday list. The Gaelic Society of London strives to do its best in keeping social and cultural functions with a Gaelic blass alive in London, and it is a great comfort to me personally to know that we have such good friends, with all good wishes for your future. It was under Pauline's tenure that the morning room of Inverailort House was converted into a sub-branch of the post office when the local post office closed down. So as a result of not wanting to lose those services to the community, she converted the morning room of Inverailort House into a post office. Pauline died in 1994, having played a significant role in local affairs, as well as in all those institutions and organisations. And her friend and companion, Barbara McIntosh, remained in the house for some years after Pauline's death. But in the intervening years since Barbara passed away, Inverailort Estate has changed hands and the house itself has fallen into disrepair. It's a beautiful house. If you have a look, you'll be able to see some pictures of it, but you'll see now the state that it is in. A house, an estate and a family which have contributed significantly to local and national stories, and a fascinating collection, which I hope some of you might be interested in coming into our Lochaber Archive Centre and having a look at. I hope you've enjoyed that. Again, I've run over time. I apologise, even though I know people don't mind. Next week, I hope you can join me for a look at some of the war memorials that dot across our landscape, reminders in the landscape of people who have given their lives for our country. So I hope you can join me next week. If you're in and around Lochaber, then next weekend there is an event at the West Highland Museum that my colleagues Peter and Rory will be at, speaking about Lochaber's contribution to the Second World War. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate to our work, then we're very grateful for that. Thank you.